everyone. I'm so happy that you've asked me to come in. There's been a lot of news about hearing aids just sort of out in the ether lately. And so I'm pleased to come and tell you what I know about it and answer any questions that I might be able to answer. Let me go ahead and I'm going to start this. Can everybody see that okay? Okay, and I just need, whoops, hold on. I lost all of you though. I'm sorry. Usually a thing will pop up and I can see you, but I'm not seeing you. There we go. No, that's not what I wanted to do. There we go. Got it. All right. I think I've got you all. Sorry. You would think that after teaching online for a year and a half here and there, I would have this by now. But all right, here we go. Can everyone see that all right? Great, great, great. Okay, so we today are going to talk a little bit about hearing aids and what options are out there for individuals. And when I was talking with Betsy about doing this presentation, you know, we talked about a whole lot of different ideas and kind of came down to, you know, the biggest concern that people have is regarding the affordability of hearing aids. And so what I think I'll do today is the way I'm going to sort of, lay this all out for you is I am going to talk a little bit about the need for hearing help and sort of some things we know about the people using hearing aids and some things we know about the people who don't use hearing aids. And then we'll go into different options, focusing on what the different options are, and then of course also talking about the affordability of that. Hopefully we can answer that pipe dream or lifeline question by the end, okay? All right, so I think it's not a surprise that our population in general is getting older. In 2010, the 2010 census, which was the last sort of tons of data that I had available, nearly 1 in 5 adults in the US was over the age of 60. And over the next 30 years, you know, the percentage of the population of individuals that are older, over 65, is expected to double. And so what that does is that leaves us with a lot of older adults wondering, what can I do when I start having some difficulty hearing? And the reason that that's really important is 1 in 3 people that are between the ages of 65 and 74 have some sort of hearing loss. We call this presbycusis, which is just kind of age-related hearing loss. But we also have to remember that a lot of individuals in this age group also have a lifetime of other events that can affect the ears. So it isn't always just the aging process of the ears, but perhaps you had a profession that exposed you to noise, or recreationally you were exposed to noise, or perhaps you were on certain medications or underwent different chemotherapy treatments. A variety of things can really impact our hearing, which is why when we look at these statistics and we see about 30%, over 30% of individuals between 65 and 74 have hearing loss, and more than half of individuals over 75 have hearing loss, that's really not that surprising, is it? The thing is, though, that when we have hearing loss and it's untreated, meaning that we're not getting sound through our auditory systems, it can result in all kinds of things for an individual. One half of it is sort of what their daily life can be like. And then the other half is what's happening anatomically when you have a hearing loss and you're not doing anything about it. So if we kind of focus on some of the things I listed over here on the left side of the screen, you know, we do know that untreated hearing loss can lead to a lower quality of life. Listening fatigue. So when you have to constantly work really hard to keep up with conversation, understanding what people are saying, especially if you live a pretty active lifestyle, whether that's just socially, whether you're working, whether you are attending lectures or book clubs, anything like that. Whenever you're working really hard to listen through a hearing loss, it uses a lot of our resources. Okay, which can then, especially towards the end of the day, really result in extreme fatigue. We do also know that individuals who have untreated hearing loss start kind of pulling themselves out of social situations and interactions, just because mostly it's difficult. And it's too hard to either keep up with conversation, or they feel embarrassed a little bit. They don't want to keep asking people for repetition or to clarify things. And so we see that people kind of start withdrawing from those social situations. And then, of course, there's tons of research that shows once you start pulling out of social situations and isolating yourself, that it can lead to depression. When it comes to things that actually just happen in the body, then we do know that the longer your auditory system goes without stimulation, the harder it becomes for it to understand speech later on. So it's sort of like if you didn't work out a muscle for a really long time, and then you were asked to go pick up a 100-pound weight, you might be able to do it, but it would probably be relatively difficult. So it's sort of the same thing with our brains and hearing, where the longer you go without stimulating, later on when you try to do that, it can become much more difficult. And then I'm sure many of you have probably seen, this has been sort of a story in the news for the last 10-ish years, that there have been studies that have shown that older adults with hearing loss have a greater risk of developing dementia than older adults with normal hearing. Okay. Cognitive abilities like memory and concentration can decline faster in older adults who have hearing loss than in older adults with normal hearing. So I think, we can see there the importance, why it's really important to treat our hearing and make sure that we are getting nice sound stimulation into our ears. But what we also know is that right now, out of the approximately 48 million Americans that have hearing loss, only about a third of those people are actually wearing hearing aids. Okay, so just think about that for a minute. We have 2/3 of the people who could benefit from hearing aids are not wearing them. So, and then the other thing is, there's been a lot of research that shows that on average, people wait roughly 7 years between first noticing any kind of hearing difficulties and actually finally addressing it. So not only is it taking a long time for the people who actually get hearing aids, but then we still have 2/3 of the people who could use them who aren't getting them at all. And, we're constantly asking ourselves, well, why is this? What can we do? It's really important, as we just saw in the previous slide that I showed you, for people to treat their hearing loss. So how can we bridge this disconnect as hearing professionals? We want people to treat their hearing loss because there can be some really negative effects if you don't. But the reality is a lot of people aren't. And so there's been a lot of studies and surveys that have asked people, why don't you have hearing aids? Or why did it take you so long to get them? And one of the first ones, of course, as you see here, is the high cost, right? And that's usually the first thing people talk about when they think of hearing aids. They think, oh yeah, they're really expensive. And they are, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about that. One thing that's also really interesting, though, is that when we look, and I think I have a slide a little bit in the future we're going to look at, when we look at countries who subsidize hearing health, so people get their hearing aids at little to no cost, they still have a relatively low hearing aid adoption rate. So still not the people who are needing them, they're not getting them. So cost is a huge factor, but it's not the only one, because when we take cost out, we are still really underfitting a lot of people throughout the world. And so then we also have to look at some of these other things that come along with it, stigma of wearing hearing aids. Unfortunately, the stigma that people believe exists about getting older, value, which is a lot different than cost, right? It's not so much the actual cost of it, but how much are you getting for that cost? Do you find that it holds high value? And then we also hear that people just really aren't really sure where to start. It gets confusing. They're not really sure, they see an ad on in between their news program, which is saying that you can get something for $50 through the mail versus an audiologist, where you might go and the hearing aids cost a little more. So, hopefully talks like this can help us eliminate that last one, right? Giving you some information about figuring out where you can start. Oh, I actually had a blank one in there. There we go. There are so many options to choose from. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and walk you through the different options of what's out there and make sure that I'm also addressing cost for each of these options as we go. So we can probably categorize all the different things that are out there that are marketed to help your hearing into 4 different categories. We have personal sound amplifiers. We have prescription hearing aids, which is more what most people think of when they think of hearing aids. These are the traditional hearing aids, the traditional model of going to a hearing professional to get them. Then we have a new category that already exists called self-fitting hearing aids. And then we have the possibility of over-the-counter hearing aids sort of coming up in the future. So we'll just quickly kind of go through those. Does someone want to ask a question? I thought I heard a microphone off. Okay. So personal sound amplifiers. These are wearable electronic devices that give some minimal increases in amplification. So they make sounds louder in certain listening environments. The thing is, though, that personal sound amplifying products, also called PSAPs, and that's what I'm going to refer to them as from now on, PSAPs. So PSAPs actually are for people who have normal hearing, which a lot of people go, well, why would you need a hearing product if you have normal hearing? Because there's still some environments that are difficult for people with normal hearing to hear in. So, especially in Ithaca, we get a lot of people who love bird watching. We have hunters in our area. If you enjoy going to lectures, the theater, trying to listen to conversations at a distance, but you have normal hearing, those environments can still be really tough. And so technically, when we see these PSAPs, we really are not they're not for people who have hearing loss. The problem is, though, that you wouldn't know this by seeing their commercials and their marketing and walking down the aisle at a store, because they look just like a hearing aid. Okay. So visually, when you see these things, they look like a hearing aid, but they don't offer the same things that hearing aids do. And because they're not marketed for individuals with hearing loss, they're supposed to be for normal hearing individuals, they're not regulated by the FDA. So kind of what this means is that there's no limits to how much amplification these devices can give. So if you're wearing one of these and you walk down the street and a fire engine goes by, those things are going to amplify really loud. Okay. There's no limitations to the technology. Whereas versus traditional hearing aids, which have a lot of limits imposed on them, of what they can do with sound. And really those are to protect the person that's wearing them. Okay. The pros of a PSAP is that they're low cost. They're really easily accessible. You can find them anywhere. But as I said, some of the cons is that they're not regulated by the FDA and they have minimal features available. So even though they cost $25, $50, $200, they don't have quite the sound quality that most individuals who have hearing loss actually need. Okay. So I can tell you right now that if you see, with the exception of some things I'm going to talk about later, you right now, today, November 5th, 2021, if you see an ad that says, purchase this device on your own and it's going to help your hearing, just know that those are not hearing aids. Okay. Those are PSAPs. And the reason I say, if you see those right now is because we're going to talk about over-the-counter hearing aids, but soon we're going to start seeing actual hearing aids available to the public. Okay. So it'll be a little confusing, but I just want you to know that with the exception of one company, which I'll talk about, there's no, by law, there are no hearing aids that are available to be purchased outside of a hearing professional. Okay. I already kind of went through these. These are just some concerns if you were to use them for people who have hearing loss. One thing that's really, I do want to bring up is that when you purchase a hearing aid on your own without the use of a hearing professional, so whether that's a hearing aid or a PSAP, there is the potential for you to be missing some medical conditions, some underlying medical conditions, like if you are full of wax, if you have fluid in your ear. There are some tumors that are associated with the ear that can impact the hearing. If you're just deciding I'm gonna hop on this website and purchase a $50 amplifier, we don't exactly know what the cause of the hearing loss is. And so you could be missing some important medical underlines of having a hearing loss. So that's also something just to consider. Okay, I'm just gonna take a little sip of water. All right, now we're diving into the actual hearing aids, prescription hearing aids. This is what you would get if you were to go to an audiologist or a hearing aid dispenser. And these are, again, wearable sound amplifying devices, and these are intended to compensate for impaired hearing. And therefore, it is regulated by the FDA as a medical device. What's great about hearing aids are that there is a hearing aid out there for any degree of hearing loss, meaning if you've got just a little bit mild hearing loss to profound deafness, there are hearing aid devices out there that are available and appropriate for you. Okay. When we say that it's FDA regulated, basically what we mean is that the people who manufacture these and the audiologists, the people helping to fit you with them, have to comply with very specific regulations. So on the manufacturer side, that's related to design and sound quality. On the dispensing side, the fitting side from the medical professional, there's a lot of dispensing laws and rules and regulations that we have to follow that protect you. Okay, those are in place for a very good reason. When we're fitting traditional hearing aids, the idea isn't just to make things louder. Okay, when we were talking about those PSAPs before, the things that aren't really hearing aids but look like them, they're mostly just taking sounds and making everything louder. Hearing aids have a lot more individualized features to them. So, we want to make sounds audible for people, and make speech accessible. So understanding what people are saying, but in a way that's comfortable for the individual and can help out in sort of situations that are really kind of really difficult listening environments, a lot of background noise. Hearing aids are never going to make everything perfect. Okay. I really don't want to, I want to make sure that I'm really clear there. Hearing aids are a tool to better communication. Okay. They're one piece of a better communication puzzle. They will not restore normal hearing, and they are not going to be perfect in every single situation. So although they have some settings and features available that help to make it easier to hear when background noise is present, background noise is still going to be a difficult environment for anybody with and without hearing aids. Okay. So, we have to have sort of appropriate expectations for them as well. When you're going to be looking for hearing aids, there's a lot of things that come into play. What do they look like? What style? And in fact, Peggy was just talking about that before we started doing this, about a friend who has a different style of hearing aid, but different styles, sizes. Do you have dexterity in your fingers? Can you actually manipulate them? Do you have mobility of your arms to help put them on? What are your actual hearing needs, right? Because I can guarantee every single person that's on here right now has a different hearing ability, okay? So what are your different hearing needs? And price, right? And features, of course. What can the hearing aid, what does it have? What can it do? What are some different options on there? And, since there's a lot to consider when choosing a hearing aid, I would say from an audiologist perspective on this list, the most important things to consider are the hearing needs of the individual, medical needs of the individual, and features, right? So just like I had mentioned before, we're trained to, when we evaluate your hearing, we're trained to see if there's any red flags there. Is there anything that I need to send you to a physician for to be evaluated before we just put some hearing aids on you? Okay. There are a lot of conditions that need to have medical attention prior to being fit with hearing aids. And so that's why, from an audiologist perspective, I would say on here that hearing needs and medical needs are two of the biggest things that I think are most important. However, from a consumer perspective, or a patient perspective, I would probably say the most people are looking for performance and price when they're evaluating hearing aids, right? So I think the moral of the story when it comes to prescription hearing aids is that, one of the biggest values of going the traditional route of getting hearing aids, going to an audiologist, having your hearing checked, is being able to have your own individual needs addressed. Okay. So, I do your hearing test. We look to see if there's any medical red flags. If not, when you get fit with the hearing aids, it's individually customized to your particular hearing loss. We talk about features that you need that other people might not. And it's just more of an individualized consultation. Okay. And this isn't necessarily something that people have to know when pursuing hearing aids, but I think it's kind of fun, some of the stuff that hearing aids have come out with recently. So we kind of categorize these types of hearing aids. We call them hearables. And basically what it is it's of course addressing your hearing health, but it's also considering your hearing as part of a bigger picture with your overall health. Okay. And so there are hearing aids right now, traditional prescriptive hearing aids that can monitor your heart rate. It looks at your activity. So kind of like if anyone has an Apple product that, monitors your steps and your calories, or a Fitbit, something like that, there are hearing aids that can do that. They look to see how active your brain is during the day. This is a big one. There are hearing aids that have fall detection technology in them. So if you are somebody who is at risk for falls, that might be something you want to consider. There's a little gyroscope in hearing aids, if you are to make a falling motion and within a certain amount of time, do not right yourself. It's pre-programmed in there. There's a number that it'll call that will alert someone that you have fallen. And then these ones are kind of just fun for people. Language translation, which I think is pretty neat. You can translate languages through the hearing aid and the app that it has. Music streaming, if you're someone who listens to music or the radio on a computer or your phone or podcasts or anything like that, you can actually stream that all right through your hearing aid. So it goes straight to the hearing aid in your ear, leading to better sound quality. A lot of people love this for when they also live with somebody else and that other person complains about how loud they're turning up the TV or the music that they're listening to and things like that. There's also phone call streaming. So if you have a Bluetooth capable telephone and someone calls it, it will, instead of having to pick up the phone and listen through the phone will send that phone call right into your hearing aids. And so it's private. You are the only one hearing it. And it is customized to your hearing. So it does give some amplification and it helps to make phone calls a little bit clearer. Kind of finishing up with traditional hearing aids. Well, I guess I'm not quite there, but I kind of wanted to talk about satisfaction. So I can see a few of you on the screen. Some of you don't have your camera on, but there's little digital thumbs up, thumbs down that you can use if you want. But show of hands, how many people know somebody who got hearing aids and they hate them? I do. Right? A lot of times we hear the horror stories of hearing aids. Oh, I spent this much money. They don't do anything for me. I never wear them. I don't know. They're all right sometimes. They don't do a whole lot. But the reality of the situation is when we actually ask people who have hearing aids how satisfied they are, we actually have an incredibly high satisfaction rate. So I'm going to bring your attention over here to the yellow bars on this graph. So every few years, there's a survey that goes out in the US, it's called Market Track, to individuals who either have hearing loss and have bought hearing aids or have hearing loss and have decided not to get hearing aids quite yet, okay? And that study asks a variety of questions. And one of those questions is, how satisfied are you overall with your hearing aids? And we can see this is comparing the 2014 to the 2018 market track. We went from 81% to 83% satisfaction rates. So that's a pretty high satisfaction rate, okay? These other bars are just other types of surveys that are very similar to the US one, but that are in France, the UK, and Germany. Okay. And so we can see that satisfaction rates actually are pretty high, and we rank right up there, even though we are a country that does not pay for hearing aids right now. So unfortunately, cost is still a factor for us, but we have 83% satisfaction, which is really saying something for what we've got with our current model of getting hearing aids and seeing a professional to get them. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to spend too much time on this part because I want to move on to some of the other options other than prescription hearing aids right now. But this is sort of what you have to do to get a hearing aid currently. So you have to go get a hearing test. New York State still requires that you get medical clearance from a physician. You would then the audiologist or the hearing aid dispenser would order the hearing aid, they'd fit it, they program it to your individual hearing loss. So it's fine-tuned for you individually, give you instructions and guidance on how to use it, how to care for it, some support getting used to it because it is brand new technology. And then also there are some people who getting a hearing aid isn't quite enough and you need additional services, different rehab services that help you to retrain your brain to hear and things like that. So now I'm going to ask, and you can use the chat for this if you want to, because I pulled it up on here. I'm just curious, how much do you think a pair of hearing aids costs? So two hearing aids. Most people have hearing loss in both ears, so they need 2 hearing aids. How much do you think a pair of hearing aids costs? $7,000, I see. 5,000, 8,000, 56, latest are in 6,500 range. Okay. So it's really interesting to see just in this small group, the range of prices that we see there, right? New 7 to 9K. Okay. I can tell you right now, if someone's charging you $9,000 for a pair of hearing aids, walk out the door and run fast. That's too much. That is not what new hearing aids cost. Yes, I'm not sure if that's Rick or Donna, because it says Rick and Donna, but oh, I see you. Hi, Rick. You can get cheaper hearing aids with less features. And exactly that. Yep, exactly. The reason I ask this is because there is a huge range of how much hearing aids cost. So a lot of people that I hear say, I can't afford hearing aids. They're $7,000 a pair. And my answer to that is, you're right. There are some hearing aids that people are charging $7,000 for a pair. My personal opinion, that's still a little bit on the high end. There's different levels of hearing aids, and the different features that are in them dictate how much they cost. Okay. So you can get an entry level pair of hearing aids for about $1,500. That's 2 hearing aids. Okay. That is enough to treat your hearing loss. Is it the best option for everybody? Probably not. You're getting limited features there. Sometimes the sound processing isn't quite as fast or as clean as it would be with more expensive hearing aids, but that will get you a pair of hearing aids that are treating your hearing loss. Okay. They exist. You might not be told that right away, but I'm telling you right now to advocate for yourself, ask about the different prices of the different levels of hearing aids if you do go to get a hearing aid consultation. Okay. So when we say affordable hearing aids, I have a little problem with that word a little bit, affordable, because that's different for everybody, right? What's affordable to one person is going to be different for another person. However, I want you to know that hearing aids do not have to cost you $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 a pair. I'm also, just a little piece of advice. Let's say you do want to get hearing aids that have the best of the best of the best, all the features, all the bells and whistles, just came out last week. You want the newest and the best. If they will not cost you more than $7,000. If somebody is asking you for more than that, then I'm not really sure why, but it does not have to cost that much. Okay. So that's one of the biggest things I want you to realize. Under the current model, right now, to get actual hearing aids, you have to go to an audiologist or a hearing instrument specialist. There are affordable options already. Okay. Let's talk insurance coverage. All right. So right now, Medicare does not cover hearing aids. We're going to talk about this in about 5-10 minutes. Okay. Because that's going to change, I think. We'll see. Some people do, though, have private insurance that will cover hearing aids. And so if you do have a private insurance, I do encourage you to check into the benefits there. It's going to be a little different for everyone. So I can't really quite address what that might look like because every insurance company is going to offer a different benefit. But what I do want to talk about is, why are the prices of hearing aids what they are? Why do they have such a hefty price tag? Well, typically when we see these prices, when we're quoted a price for hearing aids, it includes a lot more than just the hearing aids. Okay. A lot of times our field does something called bundled pricing. And it's a lot different than a lot of other places, like other fields and things that you might do. So it's not always a concept that people really think about. So bundled pricing means that when you purchase hearing aids, you're not only just purchasing the hearing aids, you're also purchasing warranties. So if during your warranty period, the hearing aid stops working, you can have it fixed at no cost. There's also replacement guarantees. So we call this loss and damage coverage. So some of you were on earlier while we were talking about how it's been a real problem for people lately that when they're wearing their masks and they take it off and the hearing aid flies off and they get home and they realize, oh my gosh, I don't have my hearing aid. Okay. Most hearing aids come with some kind of a loss and a damage warranty for replacement. And you're also typically paying for a predetermined amount of time for office visits, unlimited. So what that means is you get your hearing aids. And for example, if your bundle that you purchase, your hearing aids you purchase covers office visits for 3 years, that means you can go back as many times as you need to within that 3 years, and you're not paying per visit. Okay. This is actually really important because before bundling was the norm in our field, what would happen is people would get hearing aids, they'd go home with them, they'd kind of like them at first, but then over time need adjustments made to them, or, the hearing aids weren't quite meeting their needs. And while the audiologist probably could have fixed that and actually addressed any problems the person might have, individuals didn't want to pay to go back every time an adjustment was needed. All right. And honestly, when you first get hearing aids for the first time, it takes some adjusting. You do have to have fine tuning done. It's not something you just put on and go. Okay. So one of the reasons bundling of these office visits happened was to encourage people to come back in for the hearing healthcare that they actually need. Okay. So that's included in the pricing a lot of times. Sometimes, depending on where you go, maybe batteries are covered, maybe some little cleaning and care kits, and then, of course, in-office repairs. So the reason I'm telling you about bundling is it's not $3,000 for a pair of hearing aids. It's $3,000 for a pair of hearing aids plus years of your professional's services. Okay. It would be like, if you expected the audiologist to sell you hearing aids and then not have any fee for their time and professional expertise. Okay. So that's why bundling is there. Also, a lot of times insurance companies that do pay for hearing aids require bundling to exist. Okay. We are seeing some audiology offices in sort of a bid for more transparency so that their patients know what they're actually exactly paying for, doing unbundling, where they would just pay for the hearing aids and then maybe pick a la carte like office visits. Sometimes that can reduce the price too. But again, it's this balance between good and proper hearing health care and balancing that cost for people. Which brings me to Costco. Okay. So, a lot of people ask me, well, oh, hello. So a lot of people will ask me, I've heard that I can go to Costco. I'm sorry. I was clicking around. I got distracted. Can I go to Costco? I heard that Costco sells hearing aids. Is that a good idea for me? And my answer is, well, totally depends, right? Costco does have actual prescriptive FDA regulated hearing aids. That much is true. The other piece of it that's true is that the hearing aids do tend to cost less at Costco than they might through the private audiologist who lives up the street from you. One of the main reasons for that is because it is not the audiologist who sets the cost of hearing aids. It's the manufacturer of the hearing aid. So the company that makes the hearing aids sell the hearing aid to the audiologist. Okay, so the audiologist has to purchase the hearing aid from the people that make it. If you are Costco and you sell hearing aids to thousands and thousands of people in a month across the country, you're buying more product and they give you a cheaper price. So Costco doesn't pay as much from the manufacturers for their hearing aids. Your audiologist down the street could be a private practice of one, okay? And they might have a really booming, busy business. They've got people coming in for hearing tests all day long. They're never going to compete with the bulk pricing that Costco gets. So some of the pricing issue lies with the manufacturers of the hearing aids themselves, giving cheaper prices to the people who sell more versus the people who don't. So that's a lot of times why Costco's hearing aids are so much cheaper. They're still fine products. They're good hearing aids, but it's all about how they're fit. Okay. So you could have two different people fitting the exact same hearing aid, and one could do a really good fitting and one could maybe not. Costco can and does employ audiologists sometimes, so doctoral level medical professionals. But a lot of times they also employ hearing aid professionals or hearing aid dispensers. And what those individuals do is they are not trained in hearing healthcare like an audiologist is, but they are trained in fitting a hearing aid. Okay, there's a little bit of a difference there. Audiologists are trained to fit hearing aids, but we also are trained in total hearing healthcare, whereas a hearing aid dispenser is trained in fitting a device, which is okay if that's what you're looking for. Okay, there's definitely a population of people who just need to go and get a device fit, and that's it. There are other people who need a little bit more hearing help and healthcare help as far as that goes. So my biggest suggestion with Costco is, if there's not an audiologist employed there that you'll be seeing, if you were to get hearing aids from there, just make sure that in your team of doctors that you have in general, that you do still see an audiologist somewhere. You can go to an audiologist just for testing and advice, and then go to Costco and purchase the hearing aid. That's fine. It's not what my recommendation would be. I think it's better to see the actual person that's testing your hearing and actually do the fitting and the follow-up, but it's fine. It's okay to go to Costco and see a hearing aid dispenser as long as you have an audiologist that you see also. Okay. So this is what people have been asking about a bunch. We're going to switch from talking about prescriptive hearing aids. And the reason that I spent so much time on that is because I wanted to dispel maybe a few myths that are out there about the cost of hearing aids, and that affordable hearing aids don't already exist, because they do. But now we're going to move and transition, talk about over the counter hearing aids. So there's been a lot of buzz about this for the last few years. So in 2017, there was an FDA reauthorization act, and they basically said that act was passed and said that the FDA needed to make rules for actual hearing aids to be sold over the counter, to be available to consumers basically through retail outlets without having to engage an audiologist, either for pre-purchase hearing evaluation or for getting the hearing aids and getting them fit. And so basically, you know, the whole point of this goes back to this statement right here that we've already talked about, that approximately 70% of people who need hearing aids aren't using them, right? Because of cost and access. So the whole idea behind this legislation for over-the-counter hearing aids is to benefit individuals who need them that maybe can't afford how much they cost right now. So trying to get more access to hearing help for people, which I think is brilliant. I think it's wonderful. You know, how it's going to be executed, I think, is going to really determine how successful this venture is. So let me see here. It was that the FDA was supposed to develop and publish rules by August of 2020, and they didn't. They missed that deadline by a lot. And in fact, we just found out within the last 2 weeks that the FDA has finally established their rules for over-the-counter. So it's really funny. Between the time that I told Betsy I would do this talk and now, there has been a ton of stuff that's happened in the hearing healthcare realm. So I am going to do my best to summarize all the new stuff that's happened. But I do have to tell you that the FDA rules and regulations document that they put out is over 115 pages long, and it's a lot of legalese. Okay, so I did my best to go through and pick apart the parts that are relevant to you. Okay, try and boil them down and summarize that a bit for you. And so basically what they came up with is that over-the-counter hearing aids will be available for individuals, and they're marketed and supposed to only be sold for individuals who are 18 years and older and who have a mild to moderate sensory neural hearing loss. Okay, so I just want to talk about that first. So from an audiologist perspective, I think that if we do have over-the-counter hearing aids, that's a perfect population for them. Okay, we certainly don't want children to be able to get hearing aids over the counter because there's a lot of medical issues typically associated with hearing loss in children versus what we tend to see with adults. So 18 and over, great. Mild to moderate sensory neural hearing loss. How many people here know what that actually means? Right? So if they say on the box, these are only for individuals who have mild to moderate sensory neural hearing loss. If you haven't seen a hearing professional, how do you know that those are appropriate for you? Right? So the idea is to make it so that you don't have to see a hearing professional, but how do you know what your hearing status is? It's just always kind of a question for me. And we'll kind of talk about that again in a moment, but let's just talk about what the FDA regulations are right now. So these are not for individuals who have significant hearing loss. Okay. If you have a moderate, a severe, a profound hearing loss, something where you're missing most of everyday conversation, it's not for you. Okay. If you're somebody who hears most of what people say, but occasionally you miss out, occasionally you can hear what individuals are saying, but it's not very clear, you're missing that clear sort of speech understanding, then an over-the-counter hearing aid might be great for you. Okay. It is going to use, the FDA said, these have to be medically regulated devices. So these are just like the hearing aids that you can purchase from an audiologist, but only for a small group of people. So it is the same fundamental hearing aid technology, But what will happen is you purchase them on your own, you test your hearing yourself, and you program the hearing aids yourself. Okay, so you have to be relatively tech comfortable. One of the things, and this might not mean anything to you, this is getting a little technical, these first two little hash marks here. When the FDA was developing these rules, they asked for input and guidance from some of the national professional associations for audiologists. So the American Speech Language Hearing Association, the American Academy of Audiology, they all gave recommendations to the FDA. The FDA did not listen to those recommendations. Okay, so the audiology associations made specific recommendations about how loud these hearing aids should be able to get, because what we know is that if you go too loud with certain devices, it can actually impair your hearing further, right? If you're walking around with hearing aids that are programmed too loud for your individual loss, it could actually cause further hearing loss. The FDA imposed limits, but way higher than what the Audiology Association recommended. So that's just something else that I want people to be careful about, okay? So these hearing aids, you'll be able to program them yourselves, but they will be less customized to your individual hearing loss than what you could probably get from an audiologist, okay? However, this is what we're looking for, right? We want them to be much less expensive, and they will be, okay? So price, if price is the biggest factor, if that's the biggest barrier to keeping you from getting hearing aids, then this is great, okay? And I know that, you know, I try not to talk about this in a very biased way, but it's a little difficult as an audiologist, because for me, what I really want is the best for my patients. I want to see everybody who has hearing loss be able to be fit with hearing aids, but I also want to protect them and make sure that it's done appropriately. The good thing is this is going to get hearing aids into the hands of many more people, okay? Right now, what's going to happen is that in January, I just lost the date. I forgot it on top of my head, but I think it's January 20th of 2022. So just in a few months, people have from now until that date to give the FDA comments and regulations on their rulings, their rules and guidance that they came up with. After that, the FDA will finalize their guidelines. So I definitely see over-the-counter hearing aids coming into the public realm probably sometime in 2022. It's just a matter of how long it will take after the public comment period is over in January, how long it takes the FDA to actually just finalize all those rules after they've gotten comment. But it's coming. It's definitely coming. It will offer a much more affordable option. I think that this really quickly, I know we're kind of getting close to the end here, and I do want to leave time for questions. I'm sorry, there's so much info. But really quickly, that survey that I told you about, where we asked people with hearing aids for their opinions on different things, what I thought was interesting is one question that was asked is, how do you think you would have purchased if an over-the-counter hearing aid option had been available? 65% of people said that they still would have gotten their hearing aid through a healthcare professional. And then 23% said, you know what, I probably would have looked at over-the-counter hearing aids, but I probably would have still gotten it through the hearing care professional. And then they asked people who do not have hearing aids already. So these are the people that are waiting. They know they have hearing loss, but they're waiting. They haven't gotten hearing aids. They asked, how do you think you'll purchase if an over-the-counter option is available? And it was definitely split. You know, we've got like 39% of the people saying I'll probably get them over the counter, or I'm not sure. And then we have, oh, what's that? 56% of people saying that they're either definitely going to still get them through a hearing care professional, or they might look at the over the counter, but they're still going to consider their hearing care professional. I'm not going to bore you with more statistics, but it basically what it boils down to is that a lot of people who already have hearing aids, a great number of people think that their hearing care professionals help them a great deal with being able to be fit properly with their hearing aids. So what I think if I had to summarize what's going on with over the counter right now, coming soon, very soon. We are a lot further along than we've been waiting since August of 2020 to get these rules from the FDA, and they're out. So that's great. They're going to be much more affordable for a lot of people. My biggest thing I would urge you, if you decide to go the over-the-counter route, I think you should get a hearing test from a professional first. Don't rely just on the hearing test through the self-hearing test. Get a hearing test. Make sure there are no underlying medical conditions that are being missed. Then if you choose to get over-the-counter hearing aids, that's great. Do some self-fitting. You may also, depending on the audiologist, I would do this if anybody was interested. If you bring them in, there are tests that can be done to make sure that they're amplifying properly for your hearing loss. Okay. So I think over-the-counter hearing aids are great, but I would urge people that if that's how you decide to do it, to still include a hearing care professional to make sure it's being done properly for you. Okay. I'll caution you right now, audiologists won't have a way to actually change the settings on the over-the-counter hearing aids. That's all you. You'll be able to do that, but we can at least tell you what your hearing loss is and if it's a good option for you. And after you get them, are they fit properly for your hearing loss? Okay. Okay. I was asked to talk really quickly about Bose hearing aids. I don't know if anybody's heard about this, but Bose just within the last year put out a pair of hearing aids. They're $850 a pair. They actually are considered medical hearing aids. I didn't realize this, but they are, and they're the very first kind that the FDA approved for self-testing and self-fitting. So they're not quite over the counter yet because we don't have a legal category for over the counter yet, but they're also not quite prescription hearing aids because you're not getting them from an audiologist, you're purchasing them for yourself. Because they're not, they do have a limitation on features. Bose sound quality is always top notch, but there are limitations on features versus hearing aids that you could get from an audiologist. But preliminary reports from people who are using them and audiologists who have checked them out is that they're a pretty good option. Okay, these are a pretty good option. Again, if you want to do it the really right way, maybe bring them into an audiologist who can check and run what we call a verification test to see if they're fit correctly for your particular hearing loss. Last one, and then I'll stop talking, and I can stick around. I know we said 3 o'clock be done, but I can stick around and answer questions for as long as people want. But I want to talk about Medicare coverage really quickly. So I don't know if anybody's been paying attention, but there's a huge bipartisan infrastructure bill and a House reconciliation package that's being tried. This maybe might even go up for vote today, but I don't think it's going to. But basically within this is an expansion proposal. And in this House reconciliation package, that expansion proposal, one of the biggest things that they're trying to do is expand hearing care through Medicare. And so right now, the way that the bill is written is that there's $35 billion earmarked for hearing care. If this passes as currently written, it probably will not go into effect until January of 2024. So we still have a few years, okay? About 2 years until we'll actually see the effects of this. But it's a real possibility at this point. that Medicare might start covering hearing aids. Some of the things, and some of this might matter to you and some of it might not, but some of the things that are in the bill right now is it changes hearing aids from being labeled as durable medical devices, and it changes them to being labeled as prosthetics. And what that does is it actually makes them more of a medical device, if that makes any sense at all, because it didn't at first to me. But prosthetics are more of an individually fit medical device, whereas a durable medical device, which is what hearing aids are called right now, would be more appropriate for things like orthotics and canes and things like that. Okay. This makes them more individualized for people's care. Right now, as written, if Medicare were to cover hearing aids, they'll cover them once during a 5-year period. And what'll happen is what they'll say is we'll cover hearing aids for the minimum hearing aids that are medically necessary for you. So remember how we talked about there's different levels of hearing aids as far as technology goes? Medicare's probably they'll pay for the minimum that would address your hearing needs. And as written right now, it looks like there's a provision that would allow you as the patient to say, okay, I'm going to get what Medicare would cover, but I'd like to upgrade to a higher technology level. So Medicare will cover their minimum, and then you could upgrade and pay out of pocket for that difference if it stays that way. Right now, though, it's only written for people who have severe to profound degrees of hearing loss. I suspect that'll change a little bit, but that's my own opinion. Right now, that's not how it's written. It's just written for people with severe to profound degrees of hearing loss and would not cover coverage of over-the-counter hearing aids. You'd have to go to an audiologist or a hearing specialist to be able to be fit with them and have Medicare cover them. So basically right now, there are still some outstanding questions about reimbursement exactly and how much will be covered. If this bill passes, it will go to CMS, which is, they basically dictate what Medicare covers and what Medicare pays for. They're going to have the final say on what's covered. Okay, there's a little bit of talk that the hearing aid will be covered at a certain amount, and then also professional services associated with the hearing aid will be covered separately. And again, it might take a while, and it's expected, if it passes this round, expected maybe January of 2024, which is great news. I mean, this is something that we have been asking for forever and patients have been asking for forever. But it really could, between over-the-counter and possible Medicare coverage of hearing aids, we just opened up the world of hearing to so many people. And hopefully that only 1/3 of people currently wearing hearing aids is going to skyrocket higher than that. We really hope, because that's really what we're here for as hearing professionals, to make sure people get that hearing help that they need. So that's the info. It was a lot. I did a lot of talking there for you, but that's the info that we've got for currently options for you to get hearing aids and the differences in prices. But then also, you know, you always have to balance cost with what you're getting. Okay. So I just urge you to always still make sure that you're getting evaluated by hearing professionals so that no underlying medical conditions are missed. That's really my biggest thing as an audiologist. So I'm happy to open it up to questions. Oh, Rick, to answer your question. So Rick, you put something in the chat about the 2 bullets I had on that slide about the over-the-counter legislation. Yeah, so no limit to amplification, but then max output. So technically those are 2 different things. So I know it doesn't sound like it. So maximum amplification means when we talk about max gain, what that means is for different sounds. Are you familiar with sounds and decibel levels and things like that? Yes. Okay. So let's say you have an input sound that's 50 decibels. Okay. Max amplification limit. Let's say we put a 25 decibel max amplification limit on that. That means if a 50 decibel sound comes in, it can't get louder than 75 decibels. Okay. Right now, there's no max limit. There are overall output limits though, of 115 to 120 decibels. Does that make any more sense? I'm happy to talk about that with you a little bit more technically if you want to. I try not to get into it too much because a lot of people glaze over when we start talking about decibel levels. Betsy?
So first of all, thank you so much. This was everything I really wanted to know. And now, having taken notes and having access to the recording, I know it. I was wondering, and also I think Rhoda Janis is maybe still on. Rhoda is the one who referred me to Amy, saying she would be the perfect person. And Rhoda, you were absolutely right. Can you talk a little bit, Amy, about maybe everyone on here knows this, but Ithaca College, the hearing clinic, how does that work with community members? And how is that different from going to the local audiologist down the street?
Sure. So the biggest difference is that we have students in our clinic. And so our clinic on campus at Ithaca College is a learning facility. And so I actually am the only audiologist in the department. So if you ever came for hearing services, you definitely would see me, but you would also be seeing my students, which means that for part of the evaluations and the consultations and things like that, they're doing part of that. They're always supervised by me. They're never on their own doing it. But that's probably the biggest difference between us and audiologists elsewhere. The other big difference is we don't charge for our services because it's a learning facility. When it comes to any hearing tests or any hearing aid work, if we don't have to get you new parts to your hearing aids, like it's just our services, there's no charge for that. So a lot of people will come up for an initial hearing evaluation and just to get preliminary recommendations. And then I usually give them a list of local audiologists that they can go to talk about getting hearing aids.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the biggest thing. We currently do not dispense or fit individuals who are not affiliated with the college with hearing aids. Okay. So right now we're only fitting employees and students with hearing aids because if we opened it up to everybody, I don't think I'd ever be able to come home. No, it's mostly for our students' benefit, actually. It's so they can get a little taste of hearing aid fitting, but it's not overrunning everything. They can still get a chance to do some other things.
So it may be a good opportunity for people to go there and see if they are a good candidate for over-the-counter ones, like Costco ones or something, you know, that their hearing loss fits into that mild to moderate category.
You got it. I'm happy to see people to say, yes, this is a good option for you. No, maybe not for you. And then also we do have that verification system. So if you did decide to pursue something like an over-the-counter hearing aid, you could always come back afterwards and I could run it through on your head through my machine. And it would tell me, are you getting enough amplification for your hearing loss? Are you giving yourself too much sound? So all of those concerns that we had. Yeah.
And finally, if we got a hearing aid with the one where you can take phone calls, will they let through all the car warranty ones?
I know. Wouldn't it be nice if we could put a filter on there? Hi, Anne. I think Anne's got her hand up.
Yeah, this is about style of hearing aids. I have a friend who got hearing aids. She has really difficulty manipulating them. She got the kind that you don't have to change batteries. You put them in a little box. Even that's difficult. She also has trouble seeing and feeling. So that's difficult. And the other question I have about style is, how do you deal, what kind of hearing aids would you have that you can wear glasses and sunglasses and masks and, you know, that would be the most comfortable or simplest? Those are two different topics.
They are two different questions. Yeah. So if you had asked me prior to the pandemic and mask wearing, I would say that the simplest, most comfortable ones tend to be the ones that fit over the ear and that have a small, thin wire that go down into the ear. They tend to sound more natural for people. They tend to feel better in the ear, because even though you've got something behind your ear, the part that goes down in your ear is relatively small. And that was fine, even for my glasses wearers. So that sometimes it would take a little bit of getting used to it and figuring out different tricks when you first get them. But usually there's enough room back there and an audiologist can fit it so that it doesn't interfere with your glasses. Mm-hmm. But now with mask use, now we've got glasses, a hearing aid, and mask straps behind the ear. That's a lot of stuff, not only to keep back there comfortably. Sometimes masks will pull your ear forward a little bit, which makes the hearing aid uncomfortable, and it can also make it fall off a little bit easier. And so if you have concerns about that, I still feel like for hearing purposes, those behind the ear tend to be best for a lot of people. But practicality wise, if we're worried about losing it with the mask use, something that's fully in the ear would be the best option. Okay. And it's hard, I can't say for every single person, because this is why it's best to have a consultation depending on your individual hearing loss. Sometimes you can get away with the really teeny tiny ones that go down in your ear canal. Sometimes you might need a bigger one that fills up the hole inside of your ear. For your friend that has poor dexterity and mobility, maybe you're feeling in the fingers, that's tough. Rechargeable is an excellent option for individuals like that. So I know she's already got that. And for everyone else, the reason why that's a good option for people with poor dexterity is you don't have to change a tiny battery every single time. I probably would recommend for her something that was one piece all in the ear, rather than something that she's got to put a little piece into the ear and then drape the rest of it over the back of her ear. The less pieces, the less complicated, but also you wouldn't want to get her one of those little teeny tiny ones that go down in the canal. She'd probably do best with something called an in the ear, which is one piece that fits all right here, but it's a bigger one.
Yeah, she actually has that.
It's not working for her.
Well, no, not really.
Yeah. I mean, and this is where I encourage her to go back to either where she got them from, or to see somebody else who might be able to help her devise some tips and tricks. They're not every, you might have to put them in and hold them and deal with them differently than a majority of other people. And that might take some, a consultation with either her audiologist or another.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yes. Barbara?
Yes, I have a question. Once you run through your 3 years of free services,
mm-hmm.
how often or should you go back to the audiologist, because they have not followed, I haven't heard from them, and it's up to me to decide if I need to. Yeah.
I tell people, if you don't feel that your hearing has changed, it seems to be pretty stable, things are going relatively well with the hearing aids. Mm-hmm. My suggestion is, I usually say it's kind of like the dentist. I usually say every 6 months, go in, get the hearing aid checked and cleaned and make sure it's working properly for hearing aid work. For hearing test, you should have one once a year. So every time you go in, it doesn't mean you have to do the full everything. You don't have to do a hearing test and get the hearing aids checked and all of that. But I do suggest every 6 months for checking them and making sure they're clean and everything is working and that they're still functioning properly for you.
Even if I have no problems.
Even if you have no problems.
Okay.
But at a minimum, Barbara, if that's too much, at a minimum, I would say at least once a year.
Okay. Thank you.
And the real reason for that is getting a hearing test to make sure your hearing's not changing rapidly.
Sally?
Oh, Sally, yes. I have a question. Can you define more specifically mild to moderate loss? I mean, 10%, 20%, 30%?
Yes. It's tough because percentages we don't use percentages in audiology. A lot of physicians that have been practicing a long time will use percentages to describe hearing loss, but it doesn't always make a whole lot of sense to us because there's a lot that goes into hearing loss. I actually don't even like our vocabulary. We use mild, moderate, severe, profound, because again, it doesn't mean a whole lot to people.
Oh.
I tend to like to talk about what you miss, right? Because the other thing is you could have a mild hearing loss for all pitch sounds, or you could have a mild hearing loss for just a few different pitches, a few different types of sounds, right? So it's tough to really talk about that in general, but I will try and give you a sort of categorization. People with mild hearing loss tend to hear everyday conversation pretty well. They don't miss very much at all, but they do miss people who are very soft speakers, softer voices, or people that are at a distance. And they also tend to have some mild difficulty in background noise. Okay. People with a more moderate hearing loss are going to miss almost all of very soft speech. So people whispering, young children sometimes, things like that. And they are going to miss anywhere from about 50 to 80% of everyday conversation. Okay. Does that help you out a little bit?
Yeah.
More?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. It's just, to me, it makes more sense to talk about functionally what might I be experiencing rather than just categorizations.
I was given a percentage, so I'm trying to figure out where that fits.
It's, because, and that's the thing is like, because percentages don't really exist in audiology, it's hard for me to equate to something like that. But, I'm happy to maybe, if you want to talk afterwards about the percentage, I might be able to help give you a little bit of a guess. I don't know.
No, that's good. That's helpful. Thank you.
Anne?
Can you get one hearing aid?
That's what I was going to ask.
Okay. So the answer is, can you? Yeah, you can do anything you want to. Is it recommended? Maybe not.
Does that work though, if you have hearing loss in one ear and not in the other? Do they work together, or do you have to tune them, so to speak?
So if you have an ear that does not have any hearing loss, and you just have hearing loss in one ear, one hearing aid is perfectly appropriate. If you have hearing loss in both ears, it's important that you're treating both ears for a variety of reasons. Okay. So some of the things that I already talked about, auditory deprivation, right? When we talked about when you have hearing loss, what's happening is it's not just your ears, it's your brain that's being stimulated. And so when you only treat one ear, it's only stimulating certain parts of the brain and then not others, because you're not getting input into that other side. And as I had told you earlier, when you don't get input, you have poor ability to understand speech after a certain amount of time. And we also know that it's linked to cognitive decline. And so, we really do want to be treating hearing loss in both ears, because actually what that's doing is getting our brain a lot of stimulation. The other thing is kind of secondary to that is when you have hearing loss in both ears and you only have a hearing aid in one, it's very difficult then to localize sound. So telling where sound is coming from. It might not seem like that's as big of a deal, but it can be, especially for safety issues. And then also, this is like a little tiny thing that's kind of cool about our brain. Our brain, when it has equal inputs to both ears naturally helps us to hear better in background noise. So sometimes if you don't have two inputs going in, we're actually doing ourselves a disservice because it makes it more difficult to hear in background noise when you don't have two ears working equally. And that's where most people have difficulty.
I have the problem now of not being able to hear, to know where sounds are coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, yeah, I would definitely suggest getting tested and checked out about that if you haven't already.
Peggy, can you unmute yourself?
Okay. Great talk, Amy. I also want to say that you've helped me a lot all the way through, and yours is a wonderful service. So I wish it would be available to everybody. I think you said that you need to be affiliated with Ithaca College for anything right now. Is that right?
No, not anymore. So we were through when we first started slowly opening back up after we were closed for the pandemic. We tried to keep it limited just to people on campus, but now we're open to everybody again. So we're back to pre-pandemic stuff. We're seeing anyone. What I will do is I will send Betsy. How we're doing it now is if you would like to make an appointment for anything, just to get your hearing tested or anything like that, or if you have hearing aids and you want to see if they're fit the right way for you or anything, there's a link. We have a link of, it's an appointment request form, and basically fill it out. It comes into our clinic, says you're interested in an appointment, and then someone will get in touch with you to schedule that.
Okay.
And so I'll send that to Betsy and she can distribute it as needed. What I will tell you right now is that for almost a month and a half already, we have been booked for every single appointment for the entire semester. So we are now booking
this
into
semester
the
or next semester?
No, this semester. So we're booking into spring semester right now. We won't actually start scheduling those appointments until we get closer to that, but we do have a wait list already happening. So if you think you do want to come in the spring semester, I would suggest trying to request to get onto the wait list now.
Okay. That's great.
Oh, so I'm sorry. Can you say that again? If we know we want to get in for the spring semester, put ourselves on the wait list, because that will automatically go into the spring semester, probably.
Exactly. So you'll fill out that request, that appointment request form. Someone will still get in touch with you again, just to verify we don't have any appointments this semester. Would you like to go on our wait list? And then you would just say yes. And then your name gets put on the wait list. And when we start scheduling for spring semester, we'll contact you to schedule that.
Yeah. So
another question, for those of us that lose our hearing aids. And so it just dawned on me to get, do people ever mix and match? I mean, like I've got one hearing aid that's working now, and like maybe getting one of the Bose things for the other ear for a while or something. I don't know, but does that ever happen?
It's not always a great idea because every single company deals with sound processing differently. And so you're going to end up with very different quality of sound into both ears. And that might be really tricky for you to balance and get used to and all of that. If worst came to worst and you still really could only get one to replace the one that was lost, the best suggestion for mixing and matching would be to just get at least another one from that same company. So if your current hearing aid is no longer available or it's really older technology, at least try and stick with the same company that it's from and just get an updated one.
Okay, great. Could you also, if like the ones I have are good ones, could I actually go lower as far as how it works, how well it works?
Could. And actually, I meant to say this when Anne asked the question about one hearing aid versus two. So to me, binaural hearing, which means getting amplification and treating hearing loss in both ears, to me, that's so important that I would suggest for anybody who is having budget concerns to get two entry-level types of hearing aids versus one that's a little bit better, higher end, more features and stuff like that. I say throw all those extra features away and at least treat both ears.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay, 2 entry level. So 2 entry level versus if I don't want to have the money or whatever to replace this more expensive one.
Right.
Wear the 2 entry levels, or would you just wear
oh, I see what you're asking. You probably could mix and match entry levels, like different levels. Yeah, I don't know. It would depend on the company and all that. I think that's a little bit more of a specific type of consultation question. But something can be done.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
This was a fantastic presentation, and I thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry we went over so long. But
I'm not sorry at all.
I think Barbara still